Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our shoes and stepping barefoot into the warm, squishy mud of ancient Mesopotamia. The air is thick with the scent of reeds and damp clay. In the glow of flickering oil lamps, merchants crouch on woven mats, poking at little balls of clay like fussy children with Play-Doh. Except, each ball isn't just a toy. It's a unit, a promise, a tiny, mud-born IOU. Beer, mostly. You hear the slap-slap of sandals as workers file past, each one offering a huff of breath, a glance at the tally, and a grunt of approval. They're not bartering with coins or scribbled receipts. No, these folks are paying and tracking with clay tokens, hundreds of them. Round ones, conical ones, ovals, and blobs that look like squished peas. They're tucked into baskets, strung on cords, hidden in sealed clay envelopes like the ancient version of an accountant's spreadsheet, except it could fit in a goat hide pouch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening in, drop a comment with where you're from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing who's falling asleep across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging along a cracked dirt path as dusk sinks over the city of Uruk. You pass the towering ziggurat, its steps casting long shadows, and the dusty courtyard smells like burnt grain and sweaty sandal straps. You duck into a thatched hut nestled against a wall of sun-baked brick. Inside, two men are counting blobs. Not sheep, not coins, blobs. 10, one mutters, placing the final lump on the mat. You glance down. Each token looks harmless, a piece of dried clay, about the size of a thumb. But every lump stands in for something real. One may mean a measure of barley. Another, a day's labor. But most commonly, beer. Delicious, warm, slightly sour, and surprisingly nutritious beer. That's the preferred wage of the day. The Sumerians didn't invent money. At least not how we think of it. They weren't tossing coins to street musicians or tapping to pay with obsidian tablets. Instead, they made promises in clay. These tokens weren't art, they were math. Or maybe magic, sometimes both. 1 token equals 1 ration. Keep the tokens dry and safe, and you've got a week of beer guaranteed. Lose them, well, good luck arguing with a high priest over a missing lunch. Historians still argue whether these tokens started as counting aids, contract tools, or something more ceremonial, maybe even spiritual. After all, they were often buried, sealed, and used in temple rituals. Was every token just a number? Or was it a whispered spell in clay? You lean in as one merchant uses a tiny reed stylus to scratch a mark into a small slab. Not letters, not words, just dots, lines, and wedges. Still, there's something sacred about it. You get the sense that these people aren't just tracking quantities, they're building memory out of mud. The heat presses down, and you fan yourself lazily with a palm leaf. The merchant's voice drones on in a sing-song rhythm, something between a market chant and a lullaby. 1 beer for the reed cutter, 2 for the mason. You glance again at the tokens and wonder, what happens if someone cheats? What if they press a fake blob? Turns out, they'd already thought of that. The tokens were baked, fired in simple clay ovens or dried under the merciless sun until they hardened like mini fossils. Try to fake one, and it would crack differently. Way wrong. Look suspicious. The original anti-counterfeit system, powered by dirt and sunlight. You yawn and stretch your legs, watching a woman walk in with a clay envelope. She hands it over wordlessly, and one of the men cracks it open. Inside, more tokens. A whole little clay zoo. The room goes silent for a beat, and then someone chuckles. Her brewer owes her 3 more. You don't know who she is, or what deal was struck. But even you can sense the moment's weight. This isn't bookkeeping, it's trust, etched in earth. And you, of course, are just trying to stay awake. But don't worry, this story's just beginning. And we haven't even opened the beer yet. The sun rises hot and early over the mud brick walls of the city. And you're already sweating. You step carefully around a pile of goat droppings, trying not to ruin your only sandals. The streets of Ur are alive with movement, bakers shouting, donkeys braying, traders yelling numbers. But through it all, one question seems to bubble up again and again. Who got their beer today? It might sound like a joke, until you realize that beer wasn't just for fun. It wasn't even just food. In this parched, salty land where the river floods too much or too little and the drinking water is often suspicious at best, beer is a lifeline. It's the breakfast smoothie, the lunch drink, and the evening wind down all in one gurgling, frothy cup. You duck into a shady spot near a granary where a group of sweaty men are lined up with clay tokens in their hands. Some wear headscarves soaked through with sweat. A few look half dead. They've just come back from digging irrigation canals or hauling bricks. Now, the foreman waves them forward one by one, inspecting their tokens like a priest weighing souls. You watch as one man, barefoot, sunburned, and probably too old for this, hands over a cone-shaped token. The administrator squints at it, nods, and yells something toward the back. A moment later, someone emerges with a ceramic jug and a clay cup. The beer is thick, almost like soup. It's full of floating grain bits and smells like sour bread dough and wet grass. The old man doesn't care. He gulps it down in one go and hands the cup back. Lips smacking. Beer, you learn quickly, is not just sustenance. It's a form of respect. Payment, peace offering, fuel. The Sumerians called it kas. And it's older than the pyramids. Even children drank it. There are records, scratched into clay tablets, that list beer allocations for babies, servants, priests, and palace musicians. You wonder what baby-sized rations looked like. Half a token? A special bottle with a goat teat? Who knows? Historians still debate whether those allocations were meant literally or if they were just symbolic figures used for planning temple stores. You squint at one of the tokens. It's not labeled. Not exactly. There's no number etched on it. But the shape tells the story. A sphere might mean barley. A flattened disc? Maybe a worker's wage. A cone? That's beer. Usually. Probably. That's the thing. Nothing about this system is perfectly clear. It's not like modern math. It's all context, who you are, where you are, and how much the temple trusts you. There's a strange beauty in that. The whole system relies on shared memory and mutual agreement. Like improv theater, but with alcohol. You wander down an alley where the brewery smells hit harder. They're roasting grain today. You can hear it popping over low fires. A woman hums while stirring a vat with a wooden paddle the size of a canoe oar. She doesn't look up when you pass. She's too busy keeping the mash from burning. That batch might supply tokens for a dozen families. The brewing process, as far as you can tell, involves equal parts science and faith. They start with barley, soaked, germinated, dried. Then they mash it into a paste, mix with water, and ferment it using wild yeasts. No thermometers, no timers, just instinct, taste, and probably a few whispered prayers. What's amazing is how central this was. The ziggurat priests oversaw it. Temples ran breweries. Entire districts were designed around production and distribution. Some even had names like, the place where the beer is made, carved right into their entrance stones. They weren't subtle. And yes, there were problems. Brewmasters stole. Workers faked tokens. Sometimes, beer shipments went missing on the way to a festival. You imagine a very sunburnt guy standing in front of a priest going, "No, I swear the donkeys drank it." One fun tidbit? There's a real, preserved receipt in cuneiform from around 2050 BCE that says, 3 measures of barley to the brewer. Delivered by the overseer. On the third day. For the festival. It's the Mesopotamian version of a bar tab. The clay tablet survived longer than the tavern. You find yourself wondering, was their beer stronger than ours? We don't know for sure. It probably wasn't carbonated. It was closer to thin porridge than a pint of Guinness. But it got the job done. Workers would drink it through long straws to avoid floating grain hulls. Talk about reusable straws with a purpose. And here's a detail that's almost too perfect. Some archaeologists think beer was used in temple offerings to the gods. Imagine that. Making a divine sacrifice with a foamy cup of warm brew. Nothing says holy devotion like, to Enki. With froth. The day drags on, and you're getting thirsty just thinking about it. You sit on a low wall. Clay dust clinging to your tunic. And think about how different life is, but also not. People still work for drink. We just call it happy hour now. You wake to the sound of rustling reeds and the creak of a rope-strung basket. A burly man with a beard like tangled straw stands above you, thrusting something into your arms. You look down, it's a basket. Woven tight, sealed with a leather cord. Inside? Tokens. A whole family of them. Ovals, cones, discs. It's like someone gave you a bag of snacks with no labels. Don't drop it, the man mutters. That's a week's worth of rations for the canal crew. Then he disappears into the morning haze. Sandals slapping the dust. You blink. Wait, you're in charge of this? Someone thought you were trustworthy enough to deliver beer tokens to a squad of shirtless men swinging pickaxes in the sun. Bold move. You sling the basket over your shoulder like it's a sacred duty and head out. Weaving through crowds and dung and market stalls shouting about dried figs. The tokens clink softly. Each one represents a promise. If you lose them, someone goes thirsty. If you hand over the wrong ones, the overseer might accuse you of theft. Here's where the whole token thing gets tricky. See, not all tokens were equal, and they weren't always used the same way. You could hand them directly to a beer administrator and get a jug on the spot. Or, they could be stored in the temple, used to tally labor owed, or even kept in sealed clay envelopes as future guarantees. This wasn't casual accounting, it was sacred math. You pass a woman holding out a string of tokens like a necklace. She's counting under her breath, lips moving faster than her fingers. 3 for coolie, 2 for the herder, 1 for the scribe. She pauses. And 2 for me. She grins at you. I earned them. 16 buckets of water hauled yesterday. You nod respectfully. No one skimming off the top with that arm strength. The system worked because everyone played along. Like a secret club where the handshake was made of mud. The tokens didn't have intrinsic value. You couldn't eat them. Couldn't use them to buy goats directly. But they were backed by trust, by shared knowledge. Imagine if every time you picked up a paycheck, you had to keep it from cracking in the sun. You finally arrive at the canal, where the workers are already halfway through digging a trench the size of a city street. One guy sees you and whoops. The beer boy's here. Another slaps his shovel into the dirt. Took you long enough. My tongue's drier than a ziggurate's backside. You sit on a stump and start counting out tokens onto a mat. Hold your goats. I've got plenty. They gather round, each one holding out a palm as you place their daily tokens. Some get 1 cone, some get 2. One man frowns when he gets a disc instead of a ball. Hey, this says barley, not beer. You squint. He's right. That's a ration for grain, not drink. You mutter a quick apology and swap it out. One misstep, and you've got a riot. Or worse, a group of extremely sober and extremely irritable canal diggers. Historians still argue how strictly these tokens were managed. Some believe temple overseers checked every exchange. Others think local foremen had wiggle room, using tokens as flexible symbols depending on need. Maybe a cone meant 1 jug on Monday, but only half a jug if the brew was running low. There's a strange freedom in ambiguity. But also, a headache. The sun crawls higher, baking the earth. The men sip their beer slowly, like it's liquid gold. You wonder how many generations have used tokens like this. Probably dozens, maybe more. Some clay envelopes, called bully, have been found with hundreds of tokens sealed inside. Historians say this system goes back to at least 3300 BCE. That's before writing, before wheels, before people thought maybe eating raw onions wasn't ideal. And these weren't just Sumerian shenanigans. Similar tokens have popped up in nearby cultures. Iran, Syria, even hints in early Anatolia. It's like everyone simultaneously decided that clay was more dependable than memory. You wipe the sweat from your neck and look at the now empty basket. Mission complete. Tokens delivered. No riots. No lost rations. You might be the first person in history to successfully run a beer-based payroll system. One guy lifts his jug and toasts in your direction. To the beer boy, you give a lazy salute and walk away, letting the gentle clink of empty basket rhythm your steps. Maybe tomorrow, you'll get promoted to barley. Or, if the gods are kind, dates. The next morning, you find yourself crouched on a reed mat, staring down at a dozen different tokens laid out like a puzzle. They're all baked clay, sure, but not a single one looks quite the same. Some are perfectly round, others are flattened, sharp-edged, or grooved like they've been squished by accident, or perhaps by design. You pick up a long, conical piece. It looks like a mini ice cream cone. Minus the fun. Supposedly, this one represents a measure of beer. Not a pint, not a mug, a measure. What that actually means? Well, that depends on the context. The Sumerians weren't big on standardized ounces. Beside it sits a disk. Maybe barley. Maybe oil. Maybe a sheep. You glance at the small pile again and feel the stirrings of a headache. It's like someone dumped Monopoly pieces and Scrabble tiles into the same game. And yet, somehow, it works. The genius of the token system wasn't in its beauty, it was in its adaptability. They weren't just markers, they were math. Real, functional math in a world without symbols for numbers. 1 cone might equal 1 measure. 2 cones? 2. A cone and a disc? 1 beer and 1 meal. Add a sheep token, and suddenly you've got a festival. You try arranging a few of them like equations. It's surprisingly intuitive, and that's probably why it lasted for over 1,000 years. Before writing, before coins, before cuneiform, even, the shapes themselves told stories. A goat herder walks by, glances at your arrangement, and snorts. That combo will get you laughed out of the temple. You've got 2 cones and a disc stacked like a scribe's lunchbox. You blush and quickly shuffle the pieces. Clearly, you're not ready for advanced accounting. Historians still argue whether the shapes had fixed meanings or if their values changed based on who was handling them. Was a cone always beer? Was a disc always grain? Or did the symbols evolve, shifting like slang across villages and eras? Some even suggest that local dialects extended into the token system. That in one city, a particular shape meant wages, but in another it meant temple offering. Imagine carrying a wallet across a border and realizing your money now means cabbage. You're told that scribes, those elusive, ink-stained math wizards, could identify token sets just by touch. They'd reach into a basket and know from the curve and weight what they were holding. Beer, barley, sheep, oil, their fingers did the math. There's one rare token you've heard about, though you've never seen it, a deep-grooved lozenge shape, supposedly reserved for temple sacrifices. If true, it might be the earliest version of a tax stamp. Congratulations, bureaucracy has existed since basically forever. Nearby, a young apprentice is playing a dangerous game. He's stacking the tokens into a tiny tower. A breeze could knock it over, and clay would scatter everywhere. Don't, someone hisses. If you mix them up, we'll have to recount the whole ration list. The boy grins and topples it on purpose. Chaos. Scribes rush in, trying to sort them. One woman yells, "That's not yours. You don't even work here." She's got a stylus in one hand and a very aggressive scowl on her face. You quietly back away, still clutching your own tiny pouch of tokens. They clink softly like coins, except they don't jingle. They thunk. Back at your resting spot, you line up a few of your own tokens. You've got 2 cones, 1 sphere, and a lump that might just be a broken piece of floor tile. A merchant passing by leans over. "That one?" he says, pointing at your mystery lump. "Might have been a sheep once. Or a mistake." He chuckles. "We all make them." You pocket the lump anyway. It's strange, but you're starting to get it. These bits of fired clay were the original spreadsheets. They helped manage not just beer, but labor, livestock, tools, debts. They tracked who owed what, and when. And if you broke a token or tried to fake one, it could ruin a deal, or get you banned from the temple kitchens. A fun tidbit? Some tokens were pierced and strung like necklaces or belts. Imagine walking around with your payroll hanging off your hip like a jangly mud charm. Fashionable and functional. You hear a whisper that the temple is experimenting with a new idea, pressing tokens into clay tablets instead of keeping them loose. It'll never catch on. Someone scoffs. Too complicated. You smile. That's the funny part. The future is already sneaking in, wedge by wedge. But for now, tokens still rule the rations. By midday, you've found the best shade in Uruk, wedged between a temple wall and a vat of steaming grain mash. The air smells like wet bread and old sandals. But at least it's cool. Then, a door creaks open beside you, and someone shouts, "Watch the mash." Too late. A clumsy brewer sloshes a ladleful of thick brown goo across the stone threshold, nearly catching your toes. You scramble upright as the brewing team hauls out steaming buckets from the inner chamber. This isn't a hobbyist's operation. This is industrial. You edge around the doorway, curiosity winning over good sense, and peek inside. The brewery is buried in the temple complex, carved right into the earth. The heat is unbearable. Everything glows golden in the firelight, brick ovens, boiling pots, huge troughs lined with crusted residue. And then, there it is. The smell of fermenting beer. Sharp, sweet, slightly sour. It clings to your nose and refuses to leave. You don't know what you expected from an ancient brewery. But this isn't a quaint mom and pop shop. This is serious logistics. Multiple rooms, organized tools, teams of workers, one stirring, another fetching grain, another waving away flies like their life depends on it. Which it might. Temples brewed beer not just for festivals or sacred rites. They brewed to pay the workers, supply the army, and keep the city running. In some cities, brewing accounts for a third of recorded temple labor. You watch a woman pour mashed barley into a basin, muttering to herself as she stirs. She's wearing what looks like a scribbled checklist on a clay tablet tied to her belt. Even in the sweltering heat, she's focused. Half measured today, she says to no one. We're behind. You ask what's wrong. She glares at you, then shrugs. Missing a delivery. 10 cones went out yesterday. We should have 12 jars back. We've got 7. Beer math, the most sacred math of all. She gestures to a corner where several clay jugs sit cooling in a shallow water pit. Each jug has a smeared symbol on the side. Some look like triangles. Others like stars or fish. Marks for batches, she explains, so we know which taste like ditch water. You smirk. And which ones taste like actual water? She doesn't laugh. Historians still argue about what exactly made Sumerian beer good, or bad, or necessary. Some think it was a byproduct of bread making. Others say it developed independently, as an experiment gone beautifully right. The theory goes, leave wet grain out too long. Let nature have its way. And suddenly your bad bread becomes a fizzy soup that makes you sing louder and complain less. It was a happy accident repeated intentionally for 3,000 years. A fringe theory claims beer was discovered when someone tried to store bread underwater. That scholar has been gently asked to leave more than one conference. You pass a wall where something's been scratched into the plaster. A tally, maybe, or a warning, or both. Dozens of hash marks in uneven lines. You think of the tokens again, how each one might correspond to a day of brewing. A jar produced, a worker paid. This isn't just production, it's currency. In one corner, a young boy carefully presses tokens into the side of a clay tablet. The shapes leave little dents: cone, disc, sphere, over and over. Then he wraps the tablet in damp cloth and sets it aside. Official count, someone murmurs. For the temple stores, you find yourself wondering, what if that kid makes a mistake? What if he presses the wrong token? Does the whole batch vanish? Does a priest lose his beer? More interestingly, is that the moment writing is born? When tokens stop being physical lumps and become impressions. When clay turns from object to idea. It gives you chills. Or maybe that's just the damp floor. You help carry one of the jars outside. Careful not to spill. It's heavier than it looks. You wedge it into a pit with the others and mark a tally in the dirt with your toe. 5 jars. 4 workers. 1 left over. That means someone's getting extra. Probably not you. In the courtyard, a group of priests pass by. Humming softly. One pauses to glance at the brewing room. Then nods. It's not approval. It's expectation. This place doesn't just make beer, it makes order. And maybe that's what the temple brewery is. In the end, not just a kitchen, not just a factory, but a machine that transforms labor into liquid stability. The vat burps beside you. Bubbles popping across the surface. You lean closer. It smells better now. Richer. Alive. You dip a finger in and taste. It's warm. Gritty. Weirdly comforting. The brewer sees you and raises an eyebrow. Not bad for ditch water. Right? You nod. Then sit back and watch the sun crawl across the temple wall. There are worse ways to get paid. The next morning, your legs ache from hauling heavy jars. But there's no rest, not when the ration line stretches halfway down the temple steps. You're perched cross-legged on a dusty mat again. This time beside a weary-looking man in a goat-hide robe who smells like he's been sleeping inside a barley bin. He grunts a greeting, scratches behind his ear, and slaps down a token on the ground between you. It's a cone, worn smooth at the edges, like it's passed through 100 calloused hands. Plowman, he mutters. 2 rows. You nod, not that he's waiting for approval. Another token clinks from his pouch, a disc this time. And my wife dug out the drainage. You glance at the administrator, who raises an eyebrow but accepts both. He scribbles a quick mark into a clay tablet and calls out. Moments later, 2 frothy jugs of beer arrive. One is handed to the plowman, the other tucked into a straw bag marked with his wife's name, probably. The Sumerians weren't great at labeling things clearly. You watch as he drinks. No ceremony, just big gulps, a grunt of satisfaction, and a brief sigh. This isn't just a reward, it's fuel. You wonder if it even registers as pleasure anymore or if it's simply part of the daily grind. Eat, dig, drink, sleep, repeat until your bones turn to dust under another man's barley field. A child passes by, holding a token with both hands like it's made of gold. He stumbles, and the token rolls toward your feet. You pick it up, small, oval, and slightly cracked. Goat herd? You ask. The administrator shrugs. Might be. He takes it, inspects the grooves, or part of one, maybe a split share. Split share? That's new. Apparently, if 2 workers shared a job, say, alternating days watching goats, they could receive split tokens. Half a disc, a clipped cone, literal clay fragments to match fragmented labor. Historians still debate how precise the Sumerians were with this. Some believe they had systems down to the quarter measure. Others argue that anything under a full token was just ceremonial or settled through backroom bartering. You hear muttering behind you. Someone's unhappy. You turn to see a man with dirt up to his knees holding 2 cracked tokens. I worked a double shift. He growls. Where's my second cone? The administrator holds up the pieces. Examines the cracks. 1.5. He says simply, that's all that's marked. There's a tense silence. Then the man spits on the ground and walks off, muttering curses about scribes and their soft hands. You lean closer to the token pile. There are dozens of them. Some pristine, others chipped or half melted from poor firing. You're starting to realize that managing these tokens is less like math and more like herding ducks with a rake. A young woman approaches with a fistful of tokens bound in string. She unties them carefully, laying them out in order. 5 discs, she says proudly. We wove mats for the whole temple. The administrator nods but doesn't rush. He checks the string, counts each disc, squints at one that's darker than the rest. This one's from Lagash, he murmurs. Still counts, she says, arms crossed. He hesitates. Lagash tokens, out-of-town currency. Sort of. The Sumerians didn't have a unified mint. Each city made its own tokens. Same shapes, usually, but clay types varied. Some fired better, some cracked under pressure. Others held on to distinctive smells or textures depending on the river clay they used. You lean in and smell the Lagash disc. It smells smoky, like burnt reed, not unpleasant. Fine, the administrator finally says, handing her a jug. But no more Lagash next week. She smirks and walks away. Cup already at her lips. You jot that down mentally. Token terroir, a wine term for beer math. A fun fringe theory claims some scribes could identify a token's city of origin just by tapping it with a reed stylus and listening for the sound. Probably nonsense, but it sounds cool. The plowman beside you clears his throat. Once had a boss who shaved his tokens down. Made 2 out of 1. Didn't go well. You raise an eyebrow. He dropped a half cone into the pot. Cook noticed. Said it made the beer taste like lies. You snort, then quickly stifle it. The plowman is not joking. By the end of the shift, your brain feels like soggy barley mash. You've seen over 100 tokens pass through your hands, some familiar, some questionable, a few that might have been floor debris. And somehow, it all balances out. You lie back under the shade, watching a line of ants carry crumbs across your sandals. You think about how humans, faced with chaos, always reach for systems. For symbols. For something to make the math of life feel fair. In Sumer, it just happened to be tiny bits of fired dirt. Afternoon heat rolls over the temple courtyard like a heavy wool blanket. You're nodding off against a clay column when a low whistle rouses you. A figure in blue robes, sharp lines, clean beard, fingers stained with ink, beckons from the shaded side of the ziggurat. A scribe. Not just any scribe either. This one's wearing the temple seal around his neck, pressed into a clay medallion. High-ranking, probably in charge of more than just beer math. You want to see how we really count things? He says. Smirking. You hesitate for only a heartbeat. Then you follow. He leads you into a narrow room with high windows and dust motes dancing in the beams of light. The air smells like damp parchment and burnt oil. Along the walls, rows of clay shelves, each stacked with round objects. Not tablets, not loose tokens, something in between. He pulls one down gently, a clay ball, maybe the size of a small melon. It rattles when he shakes it. This, he says, is a bulla. You blink. You've heard the word, maybe even seen one cracked open in the street. But now, up close, it looks sealed, final, almost ceremonial. He holds it up to your ear. You can hear the clink of loose tokens inside. We used to hand over tokens directly. He explains, but then someone got clever. Said, what if we seal the tokens in clay and mark the outside instead? Your eyes widen. So the outside represents what's inside. He nods. Exactly. One disc inside. You press one disc shape outside. 5 cones. 5 cone marks. If the seal's unbroken, you know nothing's missing. It's brilliant. It's like bubble wrap and blockchain had a baby in 3000 BCE. You reach for the bulla. But he stops you. Don't drop it. He warns. That one holds 12 labor tokens for a barley harvest crew. Break it, and the overseer will break you. You withdraw your hand. Sheepish. The shelves are filled with bully, some tiny. Others as big as a loaf of bread. Some are plain. Others etched with elaborate symbols. Swirls. Tiny stamps that look like animals or celestial bodies. Historians still argue over the purpose of some of these marks. Were they decorative? Were they signatures? Were they tied to constellations? One school of thought even suggests that zodiac symbols appeared on the earliest administrative documents, but most scholars dismiss that as speculative at best. The scribe selects another bulla, cracks it gently on a flat stone, and spills the contents onto the table. Inside, 7 discs and one odd-shaped blob. He mutters. Someone slipped in an invalid token. You frown. Why? He shrugs. Maybe they ran out. Maybe they were drunk. Maybe they thought no one would open it. You both stare at the mystery blob. It's misshapen, like someone pressed it too early or too soft. Not fake exactly, but definitely wrong. This is why the outside matters. The scribe says, over time, we learned to trust the impressions more than the tokens themselves. He shows you a different bulla, flattened into a disc. Almost tablet-like. The outside is covered in wedge-shaped markings. You recognize the earliest form of writing, proto-cuneiform. This, he says, tapping it gently, is where we start moving away from tokens. Why carry 20 cones when you can press 20 wedges? The shift is elegant, terrifying, even, in the hands of a clever scribe. An entire economy moves from tactile to abstract, from weight to shape, from clay to symbol. You sit in awe. These little bumps on baked dirt, this is how writing is born. Not from poetry, not from prayer, from accounting, from beer. A fringe theory claims that these bulli were so sacred that breaking one without permission was punishable by exile. No solid proof, but you wouldn't be surprised. The scribe hands you a fresh lump of clay. Try it, he says. You roll it into a ball, flatten one side, and press a cone-shaped token into the surface. The mark is deep, clean, satisfying, like stamping your name into the world. You've just recorded a transaction. He says, now all you need is an oven and 1,000 years of patience. He laughs at his own joke. You're quiet for a while, just absorbing it all, the shelves of bully, the scent of ink and earth, the realization that literacy began not with a love letter but with a need to track beer. Outside, the sun begins to sink. Inside, the clay glows golden in the light. It all starts to make sense now. How the mess of tokens gave birth to records. How pressing meaning into mud led to pressing meaning into minds. And somewhere, deep down, you feel a little lump of clay shift in your pocket. A token, a relic, a memory. You're not sure if it means beer, barley, or nonsense. But it means something. You're back outside under the wide Mesopotamian sky. The scribe's lesson still echoing in your mind. In your pocket, the token you pressed yourself is warm from your palm. You keep rolling it between your fingers like it's a worry stone or a key. As you walk toward the workers' quarter, you spot something strange near the temple gate. A man hunched over a fire pit, sealing clay balls shut with practiced ease. Beside him, another is rolling fresh tokens in his palm. smoothing their edges with a flick of his thumb and sprinkling water over them like seasoning. This is new. You've seen people use tokens. Yes, count them, store them, even toss them in frustration. But this production line is different. More deliberate. You crouch nearby and ask what they're doing. The older man doesn't look up. Sealing a delivery. He grunts. Barley for the ox drivers. The younger one points to a stack of clay envelopes, hollow balls like the ones the scribe showed you. 5 bully, he says, each with 10 cones. They'll break them open at the granary. So the system really is spreading. You're watching the proto-contract in action. It's as if a receipt, a vault, and a whisper of trust all got rolled into one sun-dried sphere. Why not just write it down, you ask? The older man spits. Ink can lie. Clay don't. You're not entirely convinced, after all. A clever hand could fake a token just as easily as a glyph. But you let it go. One of the bully is already drying. You see small impressions covering its surface, cone after cone. In perfect alignment. The clay tells you exactly what's inside. No need to smash it. Temple seal goes here, the younger one says, pressing a carved cylinder into the soft surface. You watch as a scene unfolds, goads, reeds, stars, and a horned god holding a vessel. You blink. That's beautiful. He shrugs. Just tells you who vouched for the goods. It's incredible. Really. Each clay envelope not only contains the goods, well, the tokens for the goods, but also shows a seal of approval. An audit trail. And a delivery list. In baked dirt. You lean over and pick up a finished bulla. It's warm, solid, and heavy in your hand. You understand now why some of these were buried. Not for hiding, but for proof. To say, this happened. This was real. Historians still argue about the exact moment when bullies stopped being containers and became symbols. Some think it was gradual. Tokens kept shrinking. Marks kept multiplying, until the envelope became more important than its contents. Others suggest it was a social shift. The rise of scribes. The need for written control. The fading of oral trust systems. You've also heard some wild fringe ideas, like the claim that bully were used in rituals. Not business. That they were offerings to the gods of math. That one's a bit much. Even for you. You sit with the workers for a while, shaping a small token of your own. Not for beer. Just a disc. Smooth and plain. It feels comforting. One of the ox drivers walks up and reaches for a sealed bulla. He inspects the markings, nods, and slips it into a leather pouch. No arguing, no checking. He trusts it, or maybe he just fears the wrath of temple accountants. A boy nearby drops a bulla, and it cracks open on the stone. Tokens scatter, tiny cones bouncing across the dirt. People hiss. One man sighs deeply. Well, someone mutters. Hope he remembers how many were inside. You notice the boy collecting them, lips moving in a whisper. 1, 2, 3, 4. You wonder if someday, children will learn their numbers by counting tokens. Not sheep. You wander back toward the temple as dusk begins to settle. The golden light turns the clay walls orange, and the smells of dinner fires drift through the air. Lentils. Onions. Something vaguely fishy. In your hand, you still carry the plain disc you made. It's not marked, not sealed, but it feels real, heavy with intent. You pass a woman pressing tokens into a slab, slow, precise, one after another. She's copying the contents of a bulla into a tablet. Just in case. Double entry. Ancient insurance. It's beautiful. In a way, a world where a shape in clay means safety. A tiny bit of certainty. Forged from mud and patience. You lean against the temple wall, eyes half closed, and think, this isn't just counting. This is the beginning of memory. The next morning, you're jolted awake by the loudest sound you've heard all week. Crash. Then crack. Then the unmistakable noise of half a dozen clay envelopes, bully, shattering on the temple stairs. You run toward the commotion and find an apprentice sprawled across the stone steps. Face red, sandals upside down, surrounded by a tragic mosaic of busted clay and spilled tokens. Oh no, he moans, trying to gather the pieces like a child scooping up spilled lentils. Oh no no no. You wince. Around him lie broken promises, dozens of them. Some still roll in small arcs before settling. You crouch beside him and gently nudge a few cone-shaped tokens with your finger. Where were these going? You ask. He groans. Festival rations. For the temple guards, I was just, he pauses. Eyes darting around, rushing a little. Clearly. Scribes begin to gather like carrion birds, squinting at the broken pieces. One of them lets out a long, exhausted sigh. Guess we're decoding the past the hard way today. So begins your first real forensic token reconstruction. You kneel beside a shattered bulla and inspect it closely. The outer surface bears faint impressions, 10 cones, a disc, and something that looks like a fish? You raise an eyebrow. Fish? You murmur. A younger scribe nods. Beer plus bread plus dried fish. Classic lunch bundle. You can't help it. Sumerian Happy Meal? He chuckles. With extra crunch. Each bulla is like a riddle. The impressions on the outside tell you what should be inside, but now, with clay everywhere and tokens bouncing into drainage ditches, the real challenge is figuring out what belonged where. You find a half token, split cleanly down the middle, and hold it up. Do we even know what this was? The scribe shrugs. Could be a split barley share. Or someone dropped it before the bulla was sealed. We won't know unless we compare the halves. This is the thing historians still wrestle with. Were all tokens inside a bulla faithfully represented on the outside? Or were some implied? Were there backups? Duplicates? One theory suggests scribes sometimes added more marks than tokens, just to account for losses. Another theory says bulli were symbolic more than literal. They didn't contain tokens to prove value, but to represent the memory of it, which is mind-bending. You're basically trusting a clay fortune cookie not to lie to you. You're called over to another cracked bulla, this one with unusual symbols on the outside. Not the typical cones and discs, these are more complex. A scribe identifies them as special issue marks, used for festivals, or urgent military deployments, or maybe tribute from a nearby village. The apprentice sniffles behind you. Do you think they'll fire me? You glance at the pile of clay around him. Let's just say you've contributed to the development of archaeology, in real time. He doesn't laugh. Still, you can't stay mad at him. The fact that these tokens can break, scatter, get misread, get lost, it says something powerful. That even the most sophisticated accounting system in the ancient world was still fragile. Still human. Still, clay. One of the scribes suddenly perks up. Wait, he picks up a cracked bulla, turns it over, and points to a section near the seam. This seal was tampered with. Everyone leans in. The impression is smudged, like someone pressed it, then tried to smooth it over and repress a different cylinder. Forgery. You raise an eyebrow. Someone tried to change the record? He nods. Looks like it. Probably tried to smuggle in extra tokens. Get more rations. It's surprisingly advanced fraud. And it makes you realize, wherever there's a system, someone's trying to game it. Fun fact. Archaeologists have actually found dummy tokens, small, undecorated blobs, inside bulli. Were they placeholders? Counterfeits? Accounting errors? No one agrees, but they proved that the system wasn't airtight. You return to the sorting task. More carefully now. Each token feels like part of a bigger story, of labor, of risk, of the ever-present fear of being blamed for someone else's mistake. By midday, the broken pieces are sorted into piles: usable, questionable, unsalvageable. You help the apprentice carry a few intact bulli back to the vault. He's quiet, humbled, probably doomed to sweep courtyards for the next moon cycle. Still, you feel a weird kind of hope. Because if Sumerians managed to run a proto-bureaucracy using breakable blobs and scratched mud, and still fed thousands of people, maybe there's something comforting in the mess. It's not precision that built this world. It's trust, and mud, and just enough paranoia to make you count twice. You wipe clay dust from your hands and gaze up at the temple facade. The whole structure seems to shimmer now, not just a building, but a repository of promises. Some kept, some cracked, some swept up and glued back together. Like people. Like you. Later that week, you find yourself standing in a quiet side chamber of the temple, watching a scribe do something that looks blasphemous. He's not using tokens. Instead, he holds a stylus, just a flat piece of reed, trimmed into a wedge, and he's scratching marks directly into a damp clay tablet. You squint, recognizing the familiar shapes: triangles, lines, dots. Wait, you whisper. You're writing the tokens? He nods without looking up. Why carry a dozen cones when I can just mark 12? You blink. This is it. The shift. The revolution. A whole system of real, physical counting is being flattened into scratches on a tablet. You lean in. On the clay slab are 5 simple marks, each a vertical wedge. Neatly spaced. Beer rations, he says. For the kiln crew. No tokens. No envelopes. Just lines. Abstract. Elegant. Risky. What if someone doesn't believe you? You ask. What if they demand the actual token? He shrugs. The temple believes me. Ah. So the credibility has shifted, from object to author. From clay to clerk. Historians still argue over whether this change happened gradually or with a few bold scribes making the leap. Some tablets even show both systems overlapping, tokens pressed into the tablet and wedge marks scratched beside them. Like training wheels for literacy. You watch as he writes more, symbols for barley, oil, fish. He pauses, frowns, scrapes a mark off the clay, and rewrites it. That alone is revolutionary. You can edit wedge marks. You can't unbake a bad token. A younger apprentice sits beside him, copying the marks onto his own tablet. He whispers the shapes like a chant. Wedge line. Fish, triangle. You sit beside them, and the scribe offers you a stylus. Go ahead, he says. Mark a ration. You hesitate. Then carve a simple wedge into the soft clay. It feels powerful, like making fire. The apprentice grins. Now write 5 more. You do. Each mark easier than the last. A cone token used to take time, shaping, firing, drying. This, just pressure and intention. You realize, you're not just copying value. You're creating it. The scribe explains. We used to move the tokens. Now we just record them. It's faster, cleaner, and I can send this across the city without carrying a bag of rattling mud. He holds up the tablet, smooths the back, and presses the temple seal into the corner. It's official. You stare at the wedge marks. They're not beautiful, not decorative, but they contain multitudes. Their memory, promises, inventory, obligation, all packed into hardened mud. A fun tidbit? Some of the earliest known ledgers in history are precisely these, administrative tablets listing beer allocations by day, by worker. Sometimes even by mood. One record famously lists extra beer for a laborer, who sang well. You love that, even in the earliest bureaucracies. Charisma got you perks. The apprentice whispers, someday, we'll write everything like this. You laugh. Even poetry? The scribe smirks. Why not? If we can write 12 beers, we can write love. That gets you. Because it means this dull, scratchy system born from counting plowman rations might grow into literature. Into epics. Into arguments and shopping lists and lullabies. But here, right now, it's still practical, still rooted in the real. The temple has started archiving these tablets. Whole rooms stacked with them, an archive of debt and duty. Sealed in stone. If you mess up, they can check. Some say the tablets will last forever. Others joke they'll just crumble into unreadable dust. Either way, they've already changed how people live. You watch as another worker enters the chamber. Hands the scribe a token. He inspects it, nods, then tosses it aside and marks the value directly onto a tablet. Don't need this anymore, he says. Just like that, the old system is fading. Quietly, no ceremony, no funeral. You walk out into the evening air. The sound of styluses scratching still ringing in your ears. It's subtle, almost invisible, but you feel it. The age of the token is ending. And the age of the wedge has begun. The next time you find yourself in the temple courtyard, it's not quiet, it's chaos. The rations audit has begun. A dozen officials with robes more elaborate than useful are huddled around several long mats covered in tokens. Tablets, half-drunk beer jugs, and a single very nervous goat. You hang back, watching from the shade of a pillar. An administrator is gesturing wildly at a scribe. 14 cones were marked for the threshers, 14, and only 11 beer jars arrived. Where's the rest? The scribe looks up, unbothered. I counted the cones myself. The clay doesn't lie. But someone does. The administrator mutters, shooting a look toward the goat, as if it might confess. You've heard rumors that these audits happen once every moon cycle, and that temple rations were so carefully managed. Even the gods had ledgers. What surprises you isn't that they're checking. It's how seriously they're taking it. You thought a few missing jugs would mean a scolding. Instead, it's a full investigation. One man is holding a bullet to the light like a jeweler with a gem. Seals good. Tokens inside rattle true. This one checks out. Another cracks one open, and finds only 7 cones when there should be 10. Everyone stops. Who sealed this? Someone demands. There's a long pause. A young brewer steps forward sheepishly. It was the end of shift. He mutters, I thought the last few jars wouldn't be noticed. They were. He's not arrested, not fined, but the high scribe makes a mark in a small black tablet, a kind of disciplinary ledger. You suspect he won't be trusted with bulla duties again for a while. You wander over to a smaller mat, where 2 apprentices are cross-checking token counts against cuneiform records. One reads, 16 workers, each to receive 1 beer. 3 days. You do the math. 48 cones. You count the tokens. 47. Missing 1. You say. They groan. Not again. The funny part? This system is both absurdly sophisticated and hilariously fragile. If a single cone token rolls under a bench or gets stuck to someone's robe, the entire audit gets thrown off. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians truly believed their system was accurate, or if the rituals around it were more about maintaining order than precision. Was the audit about math, or theater? You see evidence of both. A temple clerk reads off quantities like a poet reciting verse, while another official inspects every mark on a tablet as if it were sacred text. But then you notice the goat. It's nosing around the mats, clearly interested in the tokens. And before anyone can stop it, it eats one. Just slurps it up like a treat. You blink. Someone yells. And then it's official. A goat has consumed part of the temple's beer accounting. You stifle a laugh as scribes scramble to rewrite totals and adjust estimates. One marks a tablet. 1 cone lost to animal interference. You lean over and whisper to a nearby scribe. You're going to need a whole category just for livestock disruption. She sighs. Don't joke. Last month a cow fell into the grain register. The audit continues for hours. Rows of tablets, bully, and loose tokens are examined, sorted, recounted. You see scribes arguing over whether a particular wedge mark means double ration or half-day labor. One tablet shows a beer allocation increased mid-week. Celebration? Someone suggests. Marriage? Or maybe the brewer just made a better batch. Another replies. That's another quirk. Beer quality affected rations. Some scribes had entire columns devoted to foam level, thickness, or even drinking satisfaction. A fun fact? One temple tablet lists rations for men with aching teeth, who apparently received a thinner brew. Sumerians understood dental discomfort better than most modern bureaucracies. As dusk rolls in, the high priest signs off on the final tallies. A dozen marks pressed with a seal cylinder across several tablets, official. You stretch, legs stiff, brain fried, but weirdly satisfied. You've just witnessed a full-blown bureaucratic ritual that relied on memory, mud, math, and trust. You don't know whether to be impressed or deeply concerned. But one thing's clear, in Sumer, beer is no joke. Even the goat agrees. You wake up sore and stiff from sleeping near the granary wall. Your back pressed against sun-warmed bricks and your dreams full of sliding clay tokens. As you rub your eyes, the smell of morning stew, onions and lentils, with a hint of something singed, draws you up. But before you can wander off in search of breakfast, you hear a shout. Caravan incoming. You look to the city gate. A line of donkeys, carts, and sand-covered traders crests the dusty road, their feet stirring up the earth like lazy ghosts. They're laden with goods, reed baskets, clay jars, bundles of cloth, and, yes, pouches of tokens. You shuffle forward as they enter the city, your curiosity sharper than your hunger. The lead trader wears a copper pendant in the shape of a fish, symbol of Dilmun, a far-off place by the sea. Where you from? You ask. Elam, he says, dismounting with a grunt, but we passed through Susa and Mari. Traded with the Gutians, too. You whistle. That's a lot of stamps on your mental passport. He opens a cloth bundle and reveals a handful of clay tokens, some similar to yours. Others, not. One is oblong and stamped with a spiral. Another is shaped like a tiny horn. A few are flatter, with unfamiliar impressions, starbursts and flame lines. You pick one up and turn it over in your hand. This one's not from here. Nope, he says. Susa uses spiral for fish. You use triangle. Both mean food. Sort of. Historians still argue whether these token shapes spread by trade, conquest, or coincidence. Were they part of a shared visual language? Or just parallel inventions in separate cities trying to keep track of goats without losing their minds? Some tokens are almost universal, cones for beer, discs for grain, but others seem wildly personal. A city near the Zagros Mountains supposedly used pebble inlays for meat. Someone in Syria marked tokens with notches like tally sticks. You wonder how they avoid confusion. Then you realize they don't. That's the job of traders. To carry not just goods, but meanings. The trader continues. Sometimes we swap tokens for local ones. Temple issues an equivalency rate. This many spirals equal that many triangles. You blink. You're telling me there's exchange rates? He shrugs. Beer's beer, but some beer is thicker. You snort. Sounds like economics was invented just to make lunch confusing. One of the scribes appears, stone-faced, and begins sorting through the tokens. He's got a reference tablet, rows of marks with corresponding conversion symbols. A small crowd gathers. You hear whispers. That one's from the Indus traders. No, those don't come this far west. But the seal looks right. Sure enough, one of the traders produces a small seal cylinder. It rolls across a flat slab, leaving behind elephants, reeds, and a bearded man with massive eyes. The scribe frowns. Never seen that one before. He picks up a blank token, presses the seal into it, and adds it to a new pile marked Verify. It's thrilling. This blend of anthropology and chaos. Every token tells a story, but in a foreign dialect. One of the local priests grumbles. We should standardize everything. The trader just laughs. You want to tell the Gutians their Go token is wrong? Be my guest. A fringe theory, one of your favorites, claims that some temples began issuing bilingual tablets. Local symbols on one side, foreign shapes on the other. Like a pocket translator, but way heavier. You help carry one of the bundles to the record hall. The trader follows, humming a tune that might be a market song or just a complaint about his sandals. Inside the hall, the clay archivists get to work. Tokens are pressed into fresh tablets. Stamped, annotated, translated. You see side-by-side impressions. Sumerian cone, Elamite crescent, Akkadian jagged stripe, all meaning the same thing, beer. You wonder how far this system reaches. Is someone out there in a reed hut by the Nile trading catfish for barley using a completely different set of clay scribbles? Probably. One of the archivists hands you a freshly made conversion token, a small disc with two symbols back to back. It's experimental, a token Rosetta Stone. Want to keep it? She asks. You nod, slipping it into your pouch. It's heavier than it looks. Like a passport, like an idea. As the sun climbs and the traders settle in, you think about how the simple act of exchanging goods led to the invention of cross-cultural administration. Tokens weren't just for counting. They were for connecting. And if Sumerian beer could trade hands with Elamite wine, all thanks to a scrap of fired mud, well, maybe that's how the world got built. One brittle symbol at a time. By now, you've become something of a token connoisseur. You can tell the difference between a barley disc and an oil disc with one thumb. You've even started ranking them mentally: best clay texture, cleanest impressions, oddest shapes. But today, you're not just a bystander. You're sitting in the temple's shaded side room, sipping warm barley water, listening to three scholars argue like it's the end of the world, over a tiny clay disc with a single dot in the middle. I'm telling you, says the first, thumping the table, that's the brewmaster's mark. One dot means superior batch. Nonsense, scoffs the second. It's a quantity marker. The dot indicates a tenfold measure. One disc, 10 beers. The third just chuckles softly, running her fingers along the edge of the token. You're both wrong. It's symbolic. Maybe tied to a lunar cycle or ritual offering. You sip your drink. The disc sits on the table between them like an oracle refusing to speak. This little fight is more common than you expected. Despite thousands of tablets, tokens, and fragments, the truth is, we still don't know exactly what some of them meant. Historians argue whether token shapes were fixed or fluid, whether markings varied by city or decade, and whether some weren't practical at all, but ceremonial. A fringe theory even suggests some tokens weren't about trade at all. They were memory aids. Personal mnemonic devices. A clay version of tying a string around your finger. Oh right, I owe my cousin a goat. The more you learn, the less certain everything becomes. For example, one archive includes a cone marked with a tiny wave symbol. Is it beer delivered via canal? Ration for boatmen? Or something much weirder, like, do not drink before rowing? You lean in as the scholars continue. The debate has moved on to a spindle-shaped token with a crosshatch pattern. One thinks it's textile-related. Another insists it means 10 man-hours of labor. The third? It's just decorative. You get the urge to chime in, just for fun. What if it's all three? They look at you, startled, then nod slowly. Maybe, one admits, the meaning depended on who was reading it. That's the heart of the matter. These weren't part of some neat, rigid code. They were a language in progress. A shifting grammar of mud and need. And you, here and now, are fluent in confusion. You remember one scribe's joke: we don't record facts. We record what we hope facts will become. A temple assistant enters, holding a bulla still soft around the edges. She's careful with it, like it's a basket of eggs. The seal on the side shows a stylized star and a fish, a new symbol combo you've never seen. New batch, she says. They're combining mark types. Faster, more precise, or more ambiguous. Depends who you ask. You follow her to the outer courtyard where others are experimenting with similar hybrids. Tablet entries with both token shapes and wedge marks side by side. It's part translation, part transition. Some scribes are resisting it. Others love it. One younger scribe grins as you approach. Eventually we'll just write everything with wedges. No more lumpy pockets. You pat your pouch protectively. But lumpy pockets are tradition. He laughs. Tradition slows down trade. He's not wrong. You've seen the delays when someone drops their token pouch. When a cone gets misread as a sheep horn. When nobody agrees if a squiggle means festival beer or penalty beer. Another fun fact? There's a whole set of tokens historians call ambiguous class shapes found in multiple cities with multiple meanings. Like a language full of homophones. Only in 3D. You sit under the shade and take out your collection. Tokens you've been saving. One smooth cone. One split disc. A star shape you still don't understand. And the conversion token from the Elamite trader. You hold them in your palm and realize they feel less like currency now, and more like artifacts of a worldview. Every civilization needs a way to answer. Who gets what? For Sumerians, the answer wasn't carved in stone. It was pressed in mud. Passed from hand to hand. Argued over. Updated. Broken. And refired. You hear one of the scholars behind you muttering. Still on about the dot in disk token. Could mean, priest's beer, or maybe it just means, this side up. You smile. Because sometimes, it really is that simple. You're walking back through the temple quarter when you notice a strange sensation. Like something heavy but comforting pressing against your side. It's your pouch of tokens. You've been carrying it so long. You forgot it was there. Inside are a few leftover cones. A chipped disc. That peculiar Elamite hybrid from the caravan. And your homemade scribble stamped disc. You pull it out. Roll it between your fingers. And pause. Because you're not thinking about what it means anymore. You're thinking about what you mean to it. That's the funny thing, at some point. These little mud trinkets stopped being simple objects and started feeling like something more. Like memory. Or even identity. In a way, tokens were the original wallet photos. You duck into a nearby shop run by an old woman who trades in old things, broken seals. Defunct tokens. Scraps of unbaked tablets. She waves you in with a crooked finger. What are you looking for? She croaks. Not sure. You say. Something strange. She grins like that's the only thing she carries. From a clay jar, she lifts a small, smooth object, shaped like a turtle shell. Faintly marked with a sunburst on one side. Found it in a well. She whispers. They used to say this kind of token wasn't for counting. It was for marking a person. You blink. Like, an ID? She nods slowly. Some priests thought it could link a soul to a deed. You roll it in your palm. It's oddly warm. Or maybe that's just the late afternoon sun. No one knows exactly what it meant. And that's the point. Some tokens weren't for commerce, they were for remembrance. Historians still puzzle over small hoards of tokens buried under walls. In graves. Even baked into the foundations of buildings. Were they offerings? Contracts? Vows? Or simply forgotten purses? The woman shrugs. Could have been anything, but someone cared enough to press it into the clay and hide it where time can't reach. You buy it with 2 ordinary discs, which may or may not be fair. She doesn't count. She just winks. Back outside, you pass a group of children playing token shop, trading scraps of clay for pretend goods. 3 cones for a toy lion. No way. It's worth 5. One kid waves a flattened bulla with scribbles carved by stick. I sealed it. You have to honor it. You laugh. That's bureaucracy in miniature. But it's also community. You remember a festival last month. When tokens weren't traded, they were given. A priest tossed barley discs into the crowd like blessings. One child cried when hers cracked underfoot. She believed it was her fortune. Maybe she was right. You find yourself wandering toward the edge of the city. Toward the fields. The air smells of hay, wild onions, and wood smoke. A farmer spots you and waves. He's sitting under a tree with a jug of beer and a clay disc beside him. Leftover from temple pay, he says, nudging it with his toe. Don't need it. I'm off duty. You sit beside him, sip from your own pouch, and look at the horizon. Sunset stretches across the land like spilled ink, gold and purple and slow. The disc by your feet is no longer a thing of trade. It's a trace, a reminder that someone worked, someone earned, someone was here. You think back to the first day you saw tokens, little blobs of clay tossed on a mat like forgotten crumbs. And now, here you are, holding one gently in your palm like a fragile truth. You don't know if this one ever bought beer. You don't know if it meant barley, bonus, or begin again, but it means you remember. And that's something no ledger ever really captures. Evening comes gently to the land of reeds and rivers. The sounds of temple bells fade into frog croaks and waterbirds. The smell of spiced stew drifts from rooftop hearths, blending with the earthy perfume of sun-baked clay. You walk slowly now. The city feels quieter, as if it's exhaling. You pass shuttered shops, dusty courtyards, and stacks of tablets drying on racks like ancient laundry. No one rushes. Even the scribes stop scratching for a while. You make your way to the edge of the ziggurat. From up here, you can see the whole city laid out in squares and sloping curves. The canals glisten under the last light, and in your hand, still warm from your touch, rests a single clay token, the one you made yourself. It has no mark. It's just a disc, smooth, unassuming, but you feel its weight. You think of all the hands that shaped clay before you, all the promises, all the bargains struck with nothing but mud, fire, and faith. The temple lights flicker below, casting shadows like hieroglyphs across the courtyard. Somewhere, someone is sealing a bulla. Somewhere else, someone's losing a token in the dark, patting the ground like a desperate beetle. You remember the man whose token got eaten by a goat, the apprentice who spilled festival rations on the stairs, the girl who cried when hers cracked underfoot, and the scribe who told you writing would replace it all. And yet, the tokens remain. A fun, final tidbit? In some modern museums, children's clay toys have been miscatalogued as tokens, and vice versa. Because really, what's the difference between counting and playing? Between recording value and imagining it? You smile, and then you gently press your disc into the dirt beside the ziggurat's base. No ceremony, no inscription, just a quiet return to the earth. You lean back and watch the stars begin to prick the sky like tiny wedge marks on a celestial tablet. If the gods are keeping ledgers, maybe they're still using clay. Maybe somewhere up there is a cone for every kindness, a disc for every day well spent. You close your eyes. The air is cool now. The city hums like a lullaby. And your token, your little piece of the long, strange story of beer and numbers, will stay right there, until the wind or the worms or a curious foot brings it back to light. And now, the lights are low, the clay has cooled, and the ledger of the day is gently closing. You're still. The sounds of Mesopotamia, shuffling sandals, bubbling brew pots, scribes murmuring numbers, fade into a comforting quiet, like the hush of river reeds at night. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts stretch out like the canals between fields, soft and winding. You've traveled far tonight, not just in space, but in time, from dusty paths and token-filled baskets to sealed bully and wedge-marked tablets. Through laughter, confusion, bureaucracy, and beer. It's a strange thing, isn't it, to think that our modern spreadsheets and signatures, our contracts and ID cards, all sprouted from lumps of clay pressed by tired hands in flickering lamplight. And yet, in a way, you've touched it too. With your mind, with your imagination, you've held the tokens, you've squinted at their shapes, you've carried them in your pocket, you've set one gently into the earth. Now, let that image stay with you, the disc, nestled in the dirt, warm from the day, waiting patiently to be remembered. Because nothing, no thing, is ever just a thing. Not when it carries a story. So rest now. Float gently like a reed boat down the Euphrates. Let sleep carry you past the temple walls, past the fields and fires, into the deep, ancient calm of knowing that even mud can hold memory. Good night.